Hey, welcome to How to Make Dinner. Thanks for joining me today. I am going to show you how to make 3 easy savory galettes. I'm also going to show you that you don't really need a recipe to make a really good savory galette. All you need is a good crust and some veggies and a little bit of a basic understanding of how to make a good flavorful filling. And you can make any galette that strikes your fancy. For a savory galette, you need a few things. You need a crust, and to me, whether it's a sweet or a savory crust, my approach with pastry is to have one that I love and I use it all over the place. This dough is a winner. It's easy to work with, it is flaky, and it doesn't crumble apart when you try and shape it. So making the dough is just like any typical pastry making. You start with the flour. I've got 185 grams here, or 1 1/3 cup, followed by half a teaspoon of salt and 125 grams of cold butter, chopped up into cubes and then added in. And then I almost forgot the cornmeal, but I'm going to add it in a second here. 2 tablespoons of cornmeal. Just adds a nice crunch. And then just work the butter in. I have a few different techniques for this. I like to do the flake between the fingers method. I also like to do the flake between the hands method. You can definitely do this in a food processor too. Once it's all mixed up, add the water and the cider vinegar. It's a tablespoon of cider vinegar and a 1/4 cup of water, and it's very cold. And then just I like to use a fork to just bring it together and just kind of shake the bowl. And once it forms a bit of a lump, you can transfer it out onto the countertop and finish the job. I like to wrap it in plastic. I don't love using plastic, but I haven't found a better way to do it yet. And there it is, wrapped up in plastic, ready to chill for an hour until I'm ready to use it. Once you've got your crust, you need to think about your filling. So your fillings can be things like veggies. I like cheese a lot of the time. I like to use really seasonal things. I feel like a galette is a really good opportunity to just use what's in season and what looks really good at that moment. You do need to think about a few things though when you're thinking about veggies. So does the thing need to be cooked through? Are you using something like beets or potatoes that need to really be cooked before they go in? If so, you want to cook those in advance. If you're using something like tomatoes, they don't really need to be cooked, and when they do cook, they cook so quickly, so you can put those raw into the pastry and they'll be cooked in the half an hour it takes in the oven. Something like zucchini cooks quite quickly, but it also lets out a little bit of water, so I opted to partially cook the zucchini before it went in. The other question you need to ask yourself when you're making a galette is, do you want to make one large one or do you want to make several small ones? For the pastry recipe that's in the description below, it's enough to make 1 large or 3 small galettes. I'm going to show you how I made these, and then we're going to make one together. All right, so for the cherry tomato galette, this is enough to make 1 large or 3 small. So it's 450 grams of cherry tomatoes, followed by about a tablespoon of Dijon mustard and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And then there's 3 cloves of garlic. I'm actually just making a mini batch, which is why it looks like less than what I'm saying. 3 cloves of garlic in, and then about 20 grams or about a heaped tablespoon of grated Parmesan cheese. And then some kind of fresh herb. I like to use fresh thyme. You could do basil or rosemary, whatever you like, whatever you have on hand. And that's a teaspoon. And then just toss that all together to coat nicely. And then it's on to the dough. So this dough was in the fridge, and I'm just gonna roll it out and shape it into a rough kind of rectangle because I wanted to try that shape on this galette. I wouldn't say that I would do it again, but it was fun to give it a shot. So I'm just rolling long ways more than widthways to try and get a rectangle-ish. And then I'm just gonna kind of correct the sides a little bit, straighten them out with my fingers. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's actually better for it not to be perfect. That's pretty good. Then one more little rollout. And I like to dust off the extra flour just so it's not too floury. And then it's time to pile the filling into the middle. And you really want to leave a good inch of a border so that you have something to fold up. So the thing about this rectangle is because the sides are so long, it didn't really have enough folds to support the sides. So that's my main reason why I probably won't do it again. You'll see when I go to roll it up. So the bottom up first and then the sides, and yeah, you can kind of see like the sides aren't gonna hold themselves up that well. It was okay, it wasn't great. And then once it's in the shape that you want it, just now's a good time to transfer it onto the baking sheet you're gonna use to prevent mess. You could have done that before you fill it as well. And then just brush with some beaten egg to give it a good little glossy finish. And then I like to sprinkle a little bit of crunchy salt over the whole thing and a drizzle of olive oil. And then that goes into the oven. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the zucchini version, which is very similar to the tomato version. Amounts-wise, you use a little bit more than you think because you're gonna lose a bit of weight when you cook the filling. So I'm using 300 grams of zucchini, 100 grams of onion, and 100 grams of corn to make up the filling. So I'm just slicing the zucchini in nice kind of rounds, about a centimeter, just shy of a centimeter thick. And then I'm gonna slice my onion pretty thinly. And yeah, so the 450 grams of filling thing, when you have to cook the stuff, you do have to account for that. So this starts as 500 grams total between the onion, the zucchini, and the corn, but we're gonna lose a bit of that weight. And then we're using 3 cloves of garlic, same as the tomato version. Mince that up. And then we've got frozen corn here. You can use fresh. So I'm gonna heat a pan over medium heat with some olive oil, put the onion in, sweat that down a little bit, and then cook the zucchini just to the point where it's just tender enough that you would eat it, but not too soft because it is gonna cook for another half hour in the crust. And then I'm just adding the corn in just long enough to kind of defrost it. And then cool that mixture down completely before adding the cheese, the Dijon mustard, and in this case I decided to go out and get some fresh basil because I had some and I love zucchini, corn, basil. That's such a good combo. Give it a quick slice and then add that to the mixture. And then we're gonna do the dough the exact same way as we did with the tomato one, except this time I'm rolling it into a rough circle because I wanna do a round galette. And again, this is one small, but this whole recipe will make 3 this size, or 1 big one. And I like to arrange the veggies in a nice pattern. And then you'll see when you fold this in a circle, the edges are kind of able to hold each other up because they're in short little sections. So that's why a circle works really well for a galette. And then a little egg wash finish, and then again into the oven, 425 degrees for half an hour. And it should be bubbly and golden when it comes out. So if we're talking formula, like I said earlier, my formula for a galette is 1 batch of dough, whether that's divided into 3 parts or whether that's made into 1 big one. And encased in that dough is 450 grams of prepared stuff in the filling, like be that vegetables, it's usually vegetables or meat or whatever you're using. And then flavorings. And there's a little bit of judgment you have to use here because like if you're using like beets, for example, that are cooked, they're not going to give up much like moisture. So you might want to put a little bit of moisture in there. You might want to use some goat cheese or something that's kind of creamy, that's going to add to it. So we're going to flex all of our improvisation muscles right now. So I have random greens from the garden that I blanched earlier, chilled down till they were super cold, and then squeezed out all the juice. I think I squeezed the juice before I chilled them down, actually. So this is like Swiss chard and kale and a few other bits and pieces. It can be spinach, it can be leeks, it can be broccoli even, but just make sure it's cooked. Again, I mean, you can imagine like leafy greens are not going to cook properly inside of pastry. And if they do, they're going to leak out tons of water and make a big soggy mess. So I'm going to chop these and I'm going to weigh them as I go. See, this is another team scale strikes again. You can improvise on the fly. When you know you need 450 grams, it's like, all right, let's see how much greens we got, and then we'll just make up the difference with other stuff. This is the beauty. So I'm just gonna rough chop this, see what we end up with here. So we have 232 grams of greens. Gram green. So I'm gonna bulk that up with some more stuff. I've chosen green onions. I love green onions in like, standard spinach pie kind of setting. So I thought, why not use them here? And before I even chop more of them than I need, I can just actually pre-weigh them, make sure we're on the right track. That's pretty good. We're at 341, 358, and I do want to leave some room for other veggies. Actually, leave that one out. I have some other things I want to put in there. So now that I know I've got the amount that I want, I'm just gonna chop these up. My knife needs to be sharpened. This is a lot of green onion to chop through. This is gonna add such a nice, fresh, grassy, vibrant flavor though. It'll really make up for the fact that I overcooked my greens. Wouldn't you say? Now, I'll stop chopping when I feel satisfied. You can stop chopping when you feel satisfied. That's kind of the way it works when you make your own dinner. And let's get these puppies in there. So I'm at 340, so I need 100 plus grams more stuff. And because greens are really juicy, I decided to boil some potatoes. So I've got some yellow potatoes. I don't know what kind they are. I'm just gonna weigh them first, make sure I'm in the right ballpark. Okay, so pretty much 3 chunks. And for these, they're fully cooked. I'm just gonna slice them, and they're gonna help to just, I don't know, I feel like they'll make the filling a bit more hearty, as well as helping absorb any excess juice. And I've left the skin on because I actually love potato skin in any capacity. I know some people don't love it as much, so again, it's your choice. Okay, those are going in. And now it's pretty much just flavor time. You can kind of go crazy with whatever flavors you want. And I'm not worrying too much about amounts now because these items aren't gonna like throw off the proportions of, liquid or solid. It's just kind of, I'm just gonna flavor it up the way I want. So I've got a couple of big giant cloves of garlic here. It's actually fresh garlic. I don't know if you guys have ever seen garlic like this, that's still, the paper's still quite thick and like there's still moisture in it. It's like fresh out of the ground. It's really cool. Did you get it? Just leave it there. Okay, so quite a bit of garlic. That was like 2 cloves. Could have been more. Still could be more. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And then I'm gonna put an egg in because I really want it to, again, to just hold itself together a bit more. I didn't put an egg in any of the other ones, but I feel the need to put an egg in this one. Did you notice the blue shell, by the way? It's kind of a cool eggshell. And a bunch of feta cheese. And I don't know how much this is, but I think it's enough. It's probably 100 grams. I'm just gonna crumble that in. And then pepper and maybe some nutmeg. And then I think I'm done here. If I had fresh dill, I would probably use it right now. Oh my God, dill and feta. Nothing beats that. I love nutmeg with greens as well, so I often use it with greens and potatoes, actually, both. Okay. Let's get in there with a little spoon action. So already I'm mixing, and I can see that the mixture is quite dry because I did a good job squeezing out the greens earlier. So I'm actually going to add another egg. If it was looking pretty sloppy right now, I wouldn't do this, but I'm doing it. So the main thing with the mixture is you want it to be able to like stay in a pile on the pastry because it's a free-form pie. It's like you need it to not be leaking out and running all over the place. So this looks pretty good to me. I think it might need a bit more moisture, so I'm gonna add some olive oil. I'm not afraid of olive oil. I also didn't add any salt yet because I was a bit worried about the feta. Add a bit more of that, by the way. And I know that there's raw eggs in here, but that doesn't scare me. I'm still gonna have a little taste because salt. We need to be sure that we have the right amount of salt. It's pretty good. I think a little bit of salt is needed. Okay, so here's the dough. This is that wonderful batch of dough that I made earlier. You can use it for any savory application too. You can use it to make little turnovers. You can use it to make quiche. Really, it's such an empowering thing to know how to make one good dough, or one good sweet and one good savory dough, because you can do so much with it. So I'm just rolling this dough out, and this is quite cold, but not super chilled. I had it in the fridge until about half an hour ago. And I like to keep a good amount of flour underneath and just make sure the whole thing can move around. And you can see it's not cracking or anything. It's pretty good. I might just correct the edges a tiny bit, just to keep some level of, finish. And then the way to know if it's rolled out enough is you kind of just lift it up and feel it. And here I can feel that it's pretty even all the way around. I'm happy with it. I'm going to transfer the dough onto a baking sheet. Now I know that we're safe because we're on the baking sheet. And then I'm just going to pile all this mixture into the middle. This is probably a good... And just kind of make it as even as possible. You don't want it to be like a big dome in the middle. You want the filling inside of the galette to be pretty well distributed. So that's looking good. And see, there's no leakage. There's no like juicy bits. I'm happy with that. And then we just get to fold it up. So every few inches, you kind of fold the next section onto the previous section. And this is what helps it stay nice and intact. It's kind of holding itself up. And that's that. And so, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not supposed to be. It's kind of the beauty of it. Look at this thing. It's great, right? I mean, we'll see when it comes out of the oven. The final touch is just to brush the pastry with a little bit of egg wash. And that just means beaten egg. I don't usually add anything to my egg wash. It's just a beaten egg, just to give a lot of shine to the crust. This really makes the difference in the end. And I remember working in bakeries where people would be kind of sloppy with the egg wash, like they wouldn't get the whole thing, they just kind of slap it on, but it's really noticeable when the thing is baked if you've missed a spot. So I would recommend to really just spend a minute doing this part. If you've taken a long time assembling this and it feels like your dough is getting kind of warm, I would recommend putting it in the fridge for an extra just 20 minutes before you bake it, maybe even 10, because you want the dough to be quite cold as it goes into the oven. Otherwise, the butter will melt really quickly and it'll just fall apart on you. So this feels pretty cold to me. I'm gonna risk it. Here it goes into the oven. By the way, the oven is set at 425 degrees and it's gonna take about 30 to 35 minutes. Oh, yeah. Looks pretty done to me. Look at this thing. Look at this beautiful, magnificent thing. And one of the best things about a galette is that because you bake it on a baking sheet, the bottom always cooks. You don't get that like glass pie plate problem. Just gonna slide this onto a cutting board here. So you can see the 3 smaller ones. This is the same amount of dough, same amount of filling, just divided into 3. Let's see here. Oh, it's juicy. So really I should let this cool for like at least 10 minutes before cutting into it. But I'm not that patient. So let's just cut a wedge. A little plate here. Looks pretty good to me. Looks good, eh? Okay, should I try it? It's so hot. I could hear the crust. I should show you the bottom too, actually. It's probably nice and brown. Is it brown? Can you see it? Looks crisp. So I know that it's the summertime and you're probably thinking you don't want to turn your oven on. I live in Canada, so I'm fine with putting my oven on any time of year, but the thing about this is it's really good to eat at room temperature or cold. So you can just cook it in the evening when it's cooled down a bit and then just pack it for a nice picnic the next day. It's so hot. It's delicious. I hope this video showed you that you can make any savory galette you want with just a little bit of know-how and a good crust. So thanks for joining me and I'll see you next time. Here in Canada, we spell savory with a U, O-U-R-Y, but because I want this video to get seen, I need to spell savory in the way that most people are searching for savory, which is the American way, which is O-R-Y.